cultural issues. For example, there was a time where you could not sell a game in Korea that showed North Korea as an enemy. So like the games Mercenaries got banned, and Ghost Recon 2 got banned, the James Bond film Die Another Day because it had a North Korean villain. It didn't get banned, but it was massively protested by South Koreans. Interestingly enough though, in 2007, a lot of gamers got together and protested the government about this ban, and the government actually relented. And they said, you're right, this is a free speech issue, you should be able to play these games, and so they were allowed to play them. So they don't ban on that reason anymore. Especially because the reason is because there was long-term plans for reunification of North and South Korea, and since North Korea has been kind of acting up over the last few years, I think South Korea's like, no, it's okay to show them as an enemy. It's okay. So, and that's another thing, getting warning labels, suggested warning labels on our games, related to our content. We don't want to see this kind of thing happen. And yes, we did have the Supreme Court decision, which everyone seems to praise, but like I said, this only applies to the United States. And when we have most of the growth in the game industry, by percentage anyway, occurring outside the United States, this only helps us to some degree. It's a very insular kind of help. So, this is what we kind of get in the greater public, regardless of the Supreme Court decision. This is the kind of attitude that still prevails, even to this day, out in the public. They still see a lot of people. Now I realize it's changing, and I think we all recognize the fact that we're looking at a generational change that's going to occur. I mean, it's just going to take time, because those of us who grew up with games, we're not going to tolerate anti-game sentiment for long. And I'm still waiting for the day when, during a presidential debate, someone asks the candidates, what was your favorite game and why? How did this game influence you? I want to hear that so bad, but that's still probably quite a ways off. So, but this is a huge hurdle. It's all a perceptual issue that we have to deal with. So this is a rhetorical question. This is something to think about. But this is a responsibility that falls on us as people who do this work and our developers. When's the last time you personally contacted your lawmakers when you heard about something that they were doing or planning to do? Now I know a lot of people in the industry are like, well, that's the ESA's job. But the ESA represents publishers. They represent the financial interests of the publishers for the most part. The IGDA represents individual developers and issues that affect our lives particularly. These kinds of things, when they enact laws like they're trying to do in Connecticut and elsewhere, which are trying to ban video games for certain reasons or certain kinds of content, that directly impacts our jobs and our livelihood. And in the Connecticut case, when they were doing the hearings on those particular laws, not a single developer showed up on the steps to say anything about it. That's a problem. And so that's something that we as an organization need to change. We have issues like sexism in games, and I know this is another very volatile issue among developers. No, there's no sexism. Yes, there is, both in the games and also in the workplace, and it's two major issues. We've had some really good characters, female characters, show up in games over the years that have been very positive examples. Even if they're sexualized outside their armor. But then we have ones that may not be the best examples of females in video games, or they serve a very specific purpose, for titillation. So, or we see evolution of a character that initially started as one that was very sexualized, but in the latest iteration got a lot of praise for the realism of her character. And so it's a very interesting evolution of that particular character. So, I mean, not just on the sexism issue, but as you're working on a project, when's the last time you actually raised concerns if you noticed something that was worthy of comment and needed to be, somebody has to step up and say something about what's being designed. Then we have things, I don't know if you've all seen this video, I think it's funny, so you want to be a game developer.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Or you've got like Game Dev Story where they purposely make you on fire when you're in crunch mode. And my particular opinion is this, when it comes to crunch mode, is that outside the game industry it's simply called poor project management. And I mean, we all understand that in any job that we have, whether it's game development or something else, there will be periods where you will have to intensely work to get to a deadline or something. But when it's an expectation that always happens, and it's an expectation that happens without adequate compensation, then that's a problem. And I think in our particular industry, it's something that has been a rampant problem because it is an expectation. You know, it's like, yeah, you will work here and you will be crunching, I guarantee it. And, you know, I mean, crunch, in my personal opinion, crunch is fine if it's strictly voluntarily. I don't care, like when I was at Microsoft for 13 years, I knew people who would work 18-hour days or more and sleep under their desk and not go home for a week. That's fine with me. They don't have a family, they don't have kids, you know, their life is the company. If that's what they choose, I don't care. That's not my, you know, it's not my say to tell them how to live their life. I wouldn't say it's the healthiest thing in the world, but that's not my judgment. So, but it's not something the company should demand of its people to do that kind of thing. So, you know, when's the last time anyone spoke up about crunch time? And I know that's a controversial thing too, because some people can lose their jobs over this. You speak up about it. It's like, oh, you don't like it? I've got 20 other people who want a job, so go ahead, leave, you know. So, you know, finding the right way to get into that discussion is difficult at times. And then, of course, we've got the sense of, you know, building community, just like we have here in this room. You know, we've got chapters all over the world doing great things. We've got mentorship relationships that are important. Well, yeah, you do that one, why not? So, you know, think about it. I mean, that's what I was talking to earlier, and I think this is one of the core reasons why chapters exist, because it is that ability to connect with each other locally in this community and foster one another. You know, so when's the last time if you've mentored someone? You know, and mentoring can mean anything. It could just mean answering someone's email where they sent you a question saying, hey, how did you get in the industry? Or how did you get your job? Or how did you do your resume? You know, do you have any pointers for me? It doesn't have to be some, you know, I think sometimes when people think about mentorship, they think about, oh God, now I'm going to be stuck with this tag along for 12 months or something. And it's like, well, you know, if you want them to be, but it doesn't have to be. You can just be helping even in a little tacit way. Or if you're starting out, seeking out a mentor. I mean, I think that there's a lot to be said in our industry about following that model that's like in motion pictures and some related creative industries, where you have kind of that mentor-apprentice relationship that can be very powerful. And I know a lot of cases where there's developers like that, and it's been great. I mean, they passed along a lot of knowledge. Attended an IGDA chapter, similar meeting where you guys, I don't know what you say you did, so. You know, help the student or colleague with advice. So just simple things, so just helping each other out. That's one of the things I've been really impressed about in indie communities that I have visited here and there. And of course, since I'm in Seattle, I do spend time with the indie community to some degree. And I'm just always impressed by the amount of help they give each other. Just this kind of selflessness. It's like, oh, you guys are having a problem on that project. Well, we did it this way. And if you want that string of code, we'll just, you know, we'll give it to you. And I know it's not always that collaborative, but I mean, I've noticed that far more because, you know, people who work at Microsoft or Sony and all these, they're like, no, I can't tell you that. You'd have to sign an NDA, and then I can't be your friend, and all this other stuff. So it gets all that corporate paranoia stuff going on. So the community is, you know, it's really basic. It's a passion for games. It's a passion for game development, which I think all of us have. It's a desire to learn and improve, which I think I would argue that the desire to continue learning no matter where we are in our careers is so vital to what we're doing. The desire to share and teach what you've learned and to pass it along to people. And you can do that in any number of ways. There's people who, like a lot of the special interest groups, a lot of what their focus is codifying knowledge in white papers and other forms that they can pass along to other people. So like in the localization SIG, we wrote a white paper on basic localization practices that and it's intended for non-localization people. So it's up on the website, on the IGDA. You can go to the IGDA wiki, and there's a white paper document written by the LocSig that basically gives you the fundamentals of localization. It's all free. You know, because the people who want to pass along the basic knowledge. And focusing locally and globally is important. So, you know, it's really important to foster your local community and and help things work here, but also stay connected to what's going on elsewhere, because there's been some great examples of collaboration within the IGDA between different chapters. I found out just a couple months ago, I had no idea that IGDA Japan and IGDA Nigeria were collaborating with each other. Who knew? I didn't. I mean, it was mentioned in passing. I'm like, what are you guys collaborating on? How did you guys connect? Well, they connected at GDC and they just kind of struck up a conversation. We're like, yeah, I think we can help each other out. So I thought that was really cool. Now, managing a dev community, I mean, it's not always easy because, you know, we are, I mean, at our core, I think all of us, no matter what function we have in the industry, we're creative people. That's why we're in this industry. You know, I love being in this industry. I'm a geographer, but trust me, I have a creative side. I'm not lying. I used to be a cartographer, but I originally wanted to be a conceptual artist for Lucasfilm. That was my goal. I went in a different direction because I wanted to work on Star Wars. So, you know. But I got to work on Star Wars: The Old Republic eventually, so the circle is now complete. I did it. So, but embracing creative expression, you know, we obviously want to embrace it and foster it and not squash it and tell people that's a stupid idea and stuff like that, you know. However we can do that, because I've seen that in some chapter communities where, you know, some people get around and talk about stuff and it becomes kind of cliquish, and you know, some creative visions that might be a little avant-garde or kind of like, yeah, that's nice, it's kind of crazy, go back to your basement. You know, encouraging constructive criticism is really important, and listen to the concerns and issues and act upon them. And this kind of goes more to the chapter leadership. So if you hear people disgruntled for some reason, you know, listen to what they're saying and kind of figure out why are they disgruntled, what's going on. Don't just ignore it. I mean, we've had some cases where some chapters get sort of entrenched with how they do things, and it's like any other organization, whether it's a company or nonprofit. When they become entrenched and kind of stuck in their ways, you're not going to be very receptive or flexible, and especially don't force engagement. You know, there's people in our, as we all know, I think we all know the kind of people in the dev community who they don't really want to be part of the community, so to speak. So, excuse me. That's better. So you don't want to force them. Don't like say, no, you got to come to the meeting. You'll love it. You got to come. Nah, I don't want to go. It's like, no, you got to come. Just let them stay. So they might show up eventually. And then finally, about making it your chapter. So one of the things I see with a lot of early chapters, one of the things I always caution them about is, and this happened back in April. I was in Estonia because we launched IGDA Estonia, and right across the bay there is IGDA Finland, which is one of the most active, engaged chapters in the world. They're not the largest chapter, but they're phenomenal with the amount of stuff that they do. They've got all their own sponsors for events, and they're just super active. I mean, I went to a meeting there of IGDA Finland. They had 400 people show up in this. And, you know, some people joke, well, what else is there to do in Finland? But that's a bad joke. There's a lot of stuff to do in Finland. But no, it's just people are so enthusiastic about game development, and the community really shows up in cohesion with one another. So. The challenge that I was pointing out to IGDA Estonia is don't try and be IGDA Finland. There's a lot of good things you can learn from them, but you need to be your own chapter. You don't need to emulate everything that they do, because you're unique. You're your own country, your own type of community. You're not the same as Finland. So that's where I say learn globally, but apply locally. So there's a lot of great lessons to be learned. Different chapters who've been through all kinds of ups and downs and successes and things that they do with throwing their own events and how do they get sponsors and all that kind of stuff. And we're actually codifying a lot of this in a chapter handbook that we're trying to finish up. We're kind of working through a draft right now, but eventually that's going to go out to all the chapter leaders so that they can get some ideas on all kinds of things that they can do. So don't try to be another chapter. That's important. You just want to be unique and kind of do your thing and make it your own. And have outreach to the community. That's really important. So I know some chapters, when they start, they sort of get this notion that, well, we'll just kind of sit here and wait for IGDA Central to get back to us. and tell us how much money they're going to send us, or it's like IGDA Central. IGDA Central is right here. This is it. This is IGDA Central. There's 2 people. There's 2 staff members.